the name of my presentation is Upper Lake, 398,000 years BC to 2025. So you only have an hour I only have an hour to cover all that. So I'll be as fast as I can. I used it. Oh, and the picture is fairly recent. When were the big fires? 19. So this is an interesting shot taken by Upper Lake High School student of the fires coming down and the fire trucks here behind the grocery store. So that we start with a downer. Okay, but I picked 398 because the general consensus is that the lake is about 400,000 years old, give or take 100,000. But it's about 400,000. So I like to start with the big picture and work down. And the big picture starts with the evolution of the lake. And this is the best diagrams I've seen of how the shape of the lake has changed over the years. And so about 400,000 years ago or so, this was basically the headwaters of the Russian River going west and down. And it was kind of a meadow up here with Canocti. Yeah. And continued draining to the Russian River for hundreds of thousands of years and backed up to form a larger lake. This is the outline of the current lake, and you can see that the lake at its height covered all of the Kelseyville area, which is why, that all the soils in the Big Valley area are as rich as they are because they're lake bottom. And then it says here 5 to 10,000 years ago, my guess probably 25 or 30. As you're going Highway 20 from Ukiah coming in, you go up that grade and go down to Blue Lakes. Well, that's a volcanic movement that basically blocked the exit of the Russian River and backed it up the other way, and it started draining the other way to Ketch Creek. And this is the current size. So, and you picture over various eons, you go through ice ages and warm, and the last ice age ended about 25,000 years ago. So you can picture the surroundings of the lake being tall pine trees, and probably if you were a human, even though there were no humans here then, you could skate on the lake in the wintertime, And then the last ice age filters out, and 15 to 20,000 years ago, then the first Native Americans start migrating in. And by the time Europeans, the Jedediah Smith trappers from the east and the Spanish from the south arrive here, most Native Americans in California groups are very small and spread out. But by the time they arrived here, Lake County and the area north of Sacramento around the Sutter Buttes were the most concentrated population of Native Americans in all of California. And why is that? It had every resource you could want to live off the land. It had the fish, it had the game, it had the oaks for make flour. It had all the reeds to make their houses and their boats and their baskets. So it was a wonderful place to congregate. And so I don't know, I've never been able to find what the population, but if we're 60,000 now, there could have been 10,000 or 15,000 at that time. And this is the only map I've seen that is kind of how the Native American population was congregated at that time. So it's a little tough to see the outline of the lake, but here's the outline of the lake here, okay? And so here's the upper lake area here. The current tribe, and I don't know, I've always had trouble pronouncing Habe Motalel, headquartered here in Upper Lake, is basically a congregation of these kind of 4 smaller groups. And that tribe is headquartered here and is the economic driver of Upper Lake. They're in all kinds of businesses and they're doing very well. Going down around southeastern Pomo, I found this interesting. This is around the Kelseyville area. It's sort of a subgroup called the Habenim Napo, whatever it is. But this one over here, Ka'alanipo. Yeah, okay. So what I found interesting here is that the Lake County Land Trust has just purchased 2 large ranches there, and we're bringing things back to the way it was naturally. But the interesting part is that we're going in with the Big Valley tribe, and that is now being called the, pronounce it? Ku'ulanapo Nature Reserve. So before too long, hopefully you'll be able to walk out there. We've already got benches. It's really quite nice. So that's this. But let me draw your attention to the southern, because I'll have a little story about that. These 3 sort of sub-tribes were all kind of headquartered on islands in the lake. And you think about Italian villages on top of hills for protective purposes. Well, it's the same here with the Khoi on what's now called Indian Island, the Ilim on Rattlesnake Island, and the Camdot on what's now Anderson Island.
Oh, Anderson.
Yeah. So we've had this little controversy, not a little one, about the name of Kelseyville, right? And Andrew Kelsey and Charles Stone, bad guys. People around Kelseyville know this story, and there's a question of whether they, for those that are not here, the question of whether they should change the name of Kelseyville because of, and people in Kelseyville know the basic story. In about 1839 or 40, Mariano Rivera in Sonoma was given this giant land grant, which included Lake County, and he assumed he owned all that land, including the Indians that were here. So he basically, in the early 40s, 1840s, he ran cattle up here, cattle being the main currency. It was less for beef than for hides that were traded in Europe and all that. So he ran a lot of cattle up here. And then in the mid-40s, he took the cattle out, but left a number of them kind of running wild. And the Native Americans like that. You know, it's easier to hunt a cow than a deer. So they were getting used to that. They thought, well, this is what they left behind. But in 1847, then Mariano Rivera sold the remaining cows to 2 pretty big buccaneers, Andrew Kelsey and Charles Stone. And so that the story is then they move up here, they impress the natives, force them to build a house, abuse their women, the whole thing. And in 1849, the Indians rose up, killed them, and then they were avenged by a troop coming up from the Presidio in San Francisco, led by Nathaniel Lyon. Lyon Street in San Francisco is named after. They chase them back to Bloody Island up here, massacre them, then do more massacring down the Ukiah Valley, and that was it. So that's the story that most people around Kelseyville know. But I was always wondering, how is it? This is a big group, 5,000 Native Americans, whatever. How could 2 guys with pre-Civil War rifles one shot apiece, intimidate a whole tribe of Native Americans? I always wondered that. And so I downloaded a monograph, 2012 monograph by John Parker, that we know, the historian and archaeologist, that went into this in quite some detail. And one little antecedent story I found that might have prepared them, the natives, for not liking Kelsey and Stone, was this. Here's a picture of, this is Salvador Vallejo, which was Mariano's younger brother. I couldn't find a picture of either Kelsey or Stone, but this is Kelsey's brother Ben, who was very closely associated with Vallejo. So what I learned in the Parker monograph was that, now we're talking about the 47 to 50 when the massacre when the Kelseys came up. Now we're going back to an antecedent in 1843. And in 1843, Salvador Vallejo, with a number of his rancher friends, came up to Lake County trying to recruit Indians to work on their ranches. Recruit, enslave, whatever you want to call. And here's the route that John Parker points out, that the Vallejo ranchers, they first arrived here with the Coy on Indian Island. They talked to them, oh yeah. They bought them off, maybe took a couple of the natives, went on up to Elam. Okay, we can maybe give you a couple, whatever. Got them to roam across the straits here to what's now Anderson Island to meet with the Camdot. Camdot said, no way, we don't want to play your game. So Vallejo kills the chief and a lot of the other 5 or 6 other people, burns the entire village down, and takes off. So I don't think that this is the whole cause of why the Indians rose up against Kelsey and Stone, but you can see it's an antecedent. It shows ill will. It shows that these 2 ranchers are, agents of a larger army that might do us in. I don't think it's directly related, but I'm interested in this because our house is right here, and we look out at Anderson Island every day, and it's got one little house on it, and you hardly see people there, and you think, okay, 150 years ago, this was the center of a whole Indian subnation.
Is there a Camdot tribe anywhere? They're not like represented.
I haven't. Yeah. I don't think that they may have gone in with the Big Valley. I don't know. I don't think they're not federally recognized. No. So one other interesting story while we're on Native Americans is this. Some of you may have seen the French artist Jules Tavernier. They just had an exhibit a year or 2 ago in the De Young. A really wonderful painter. So Jules comes to, in the early 70s, he comes from France to New York and gets fairly well known as a painter there. So Harper's Magazine hires him. The Transcontinental Railroad just been opened. People in the East are really interested in things in the West. They hire him to go take the railroad across the plains to San Francisco and paint. This is one of the ones he did in Wyoming. He gets to San Francisco. Instead of taking the train back, he says, I like it in San Francisco, pretty cool. He gets to know the powers that be, does some paintings around, and 2 or 3 businessmen in 1878 invite him, we're taking a trip up to negotiate with the Indians to start a mercury quicksilver mine. So he says, okay, I'll go on up. And the natives that they're negotiating with invite him to sit in at one of their roundhouses. And he paints this truly, I think, remarkable painting. Isn't this just wonderful? And it's so much better if you really see it in person. You know, you can an artist can always paint detail in the highlights here, but if you get up close, you see really intimate detail in the shadows too. It's just a wonderful piece. And you can see where the light is coming from down here. It's just a really a great thing. And you can tell that it's right here. Why? Look at this detail of where the people come in, and here's Mount Konocti in the background. See? Isn't that something? But even more interesting is who is hiding amongst the Native Americans. Here are the three guys. Here are the three guys that are negotiating with him to build this quicksilver mine. And as everybody in town knows, this is what the mine looks like today, as an EPA Superfund. This may be a little old. I think they've cleaned it up a little since then. Yeah. So anyway, I thought that was pretty good. I know. I think it was on loan. All right, let's covers the first 400,000 years. So let's just go to see why Upper Lake is where it is. So you can see this is Ukiah. This is today Highway 20 and 29 to Lakeport. And and most of this is wetlands, and then the Middle Valley, good for agriculture and all that. And of course, Mendocino Forest for logging. So those are two of the economic drivers to put a village here. But the biggest one was really tourism, because at the turn of the century, the main attraction wasn't the lake, it was the hot springs, Huff Springs and Bartlett Springs and everything like that. So the road in from Ukiah stopped here. So this one going down to Sacramento along the lake was not completed until the 1930s. So this was the end of the line. You came in here, and if you wanted to go to Sacramento, if you wanted to go to Bartlett Springs, you got in a rough wagon and you went up over here through Clover Valley and up the road to Bartlett Springs up here. In fact, the Tallmans, the ladies that Winnie Tallman Rife that ran the hotel at the turn of the century, to make extra money, she'd get on a mule and go about 3 hours up to work the weekend at Bartlett Springs and come back. And if you want to see what Bartlett Springs was like in its heyday, look at the size, These are big buildings up there. There's nothing there now. And then they would export the water down the hill to sell the water. And this is a bigger dining room than anything we have in Lake County today. It looks like the Ahwahnee Hotel in Yosemite, doesn't it? I mean, you can picture that people would come from the city. The ladies would be up there for the summer taking the waters, and the guys would come, and so it was pretty big.
Bernie, how did they get from Upper Lake to the springs?
Through a rough wagon. So you'd take a stagecoach to Upper Lake, and then you'd get on a rough mule wagon like the ones I just showed you up there to a couple of hours. So they would have to stay. They would stay there a long time, taking the waters. So, as a transportation hub, that's what Rufus and Mary Tallman did when they built the complex that you're at today. So this was the livery stable where the horses were boarded, the Blue Wing Saloon, And then a nicer hotel than the one we now have, actually, was built in the 1870s and burned down in 1895. And the one that we restored was built fairly cheaply after that in 1896. So this is the complex he made to board the horses, to have the people transfer to the rougher wagons. And this is the family that did it. So this is Rufus Tallman. This is Mary, his wife Mary, and you can see that they were reproducing for quite a while, because this is the oldest son, and this is the youngest son.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And the youngest daughter of this guy, okay, so this guy was born in 1893, the father, or pardon me, 1836, I think, the father. Their youngest son was born in 1893, and his youngest daughter cut the ribbon on the hotel when we opened in 2006. Isn't that something? And this is the daughter that eventually took over the hotel, Winnie Tallman Rife, and she ran it up till 1947. So they had 13 kids. So I want to show you. I want to show you the family Bible. £25.
Where did you find that?
So this, about 5 years ago, a lady from Woodland came in, and she said, I'm distantly related from the guys that built this hotel. I've had this in my family forever. My kid doesn't want it. I'm about ready to throw it away. Would you like to have it? It takes 250 pages before you get to Genesis. Pictures of all the Holy Land and all of this stuff, all printed in 1884 on Sansom Street in San Francisco, and with an inscription to Rufus Tallman from his loving wife, whatever.
Do they have the names of the kids in that stuff?
Yeah, I'll tell you that in a minute. So when we first opened here's a story I tell which isn't true, but all the Gideons came in and wanted us to put Bibles in everybody's room, and I said, no need, we've already got one. So, you know, in the Bibles, they used to put all the records of the marriage, the births, the deaths, and the whole thing, and they were all in here. So I took that and made a family tree. All right. So one of the interesting things that I found in putting the tree together is that Rufus, they married in September of 1861. He's 26 and she's 16. All right, September of 1861, first daughter born January 1862. Some of you guys good at math or not?
A lot of families.
Yeah. A lot of families, but not too many where the woman is 16 and they last, right? So this is 1862, and the last one, 1893. She's having kids for 32 years. Her last kid, 47 or 48 years old. Doesn't that make you makes you a little stiff? Hard to think how she must have been. Anyway, the marriage lasts. Let's just put it that way. So let me just tell you one interesting story that I found quite interesting. That has to do with Mary Moore, 16 years old when she's married in 1861. She came from a family that homesteaded in Scotts Valley, headed by William Tandy Moore. She had a number of siblings and everything like that. So this is 1861, she's married. In 1865, William Tandy Moore takes all of his kids, other than Mary, because she's settled here, and he picks them up, joins a group of other people leaving San Francisco, heading down the coast to Valparaiso, Chile, gets on a wagon and everything, goes over the Andes. Here's Buenos Aires, goes to Rosario, up here with this group to help found a colony called Colonia, California. So I knew this story, and I said, wait a second, because I actually lived for a while here in Uruguay. So I knew that Argentina at that time was trying to bring colonists from Europe and the US to help fight the Indians. We fought them in the West, they fought them in the North. So establishing colonies up here, there was a colony, Colonia Britannica and whatever. Colonia California was to help keep the Native Americans at bay. I knew that was happening, but I didn't know why somebody that had free land here, fertile land, why would they pick up and move to South America to take on this adventure? And so a few years after that, I get a call from an attorney in Buenos Aires called Javier Mafucci Moore. And he says, Bernie, I'm just looking on the web. Are you the guys that took over this Tallman Hotel where Mary Moore? Oh yeah, we are the ones. And he says, I've got a lot of material about your family, because he's researched his family in Argentina. In fact, just last year, we got this book, The Moors, An American Family in Argentina, that he wrote about, and there's a whole chapter about Mary Moore on it. So I asked him the question, what motivated them to move? And he says, where did they come from? I said, Missouri originally. Oh, what war had just been fought at that time? Oh, the Civil War. Did they like the results of the Civil War? No. They thought that Lincoln was going to, take all their liberties away and whatever. So they were basically Confederate sympathizers that left the country. And there are other various colonies. There's ones in Brazil today that still trace their roots back to the Confederates. So that's the reason that they left. And Mary Moore probably never saw or knew their siblings again. That picture I showed you of the Tallman family was about 1895, and Javier Moore sent me this picture of her brother and his family about the same time on their ranch in Argentina. And it wasn't that long after we met that the Moores had a family reunion here in Upper Lake, and half the people that showed up didn't speak English. So the wars and these things really, separate families. Let me give you one more local story, and that has to do with the local Upper Lake Library, which is named after, the sign says it's supported by the Upper Lake Women's Protective Club. And it's named after, it's the Harriet Lee Hammond Library. This is Harriet Lee Hammond. So Harriet Lee was the sister, came from the East, was the sister of Alice Lee, which was Teddy Roosevelt's first wife. Teddy Roosevelt's first wife, Alice, had one daughter, also called Alice Roosevelt Longwell, who became quite a socialite in Washington, D.C. His first wife, Alice, died when she was only 24 years old, but this was her sister. And her sister married Charles Mifflin Hammond, who was the captain of the Harvard crew in 1883. And Teddy Roosevelt's class was 3 years earlier, 1880, so he must have known Teddy Roosevelt and got to know Roosevelt's wife and then married Roosevelt's wife's sister. So anyway, they pick up after they're married in the late 1880s. He goes to Napa, learns a little about winemaking, comes to Lake County, buys a 600 acres on Red Hill, puts in a vineyard on Red Hill. If you know Red Hill, if you're going Highway 20 towards Century Market, it's just there on the right. This is maybe that's why they put it there, so they'd be close to the grocery store. Yeah, it's just what I was thinking. Anyway, here's the picture of the Motel vineyard. I couldn't find a picture of Charles. I could only find his headstone, so pardon me. But this is what, okay, so this just shows you how Lake County was actually a step or two steps ahead of Napa Valley as a winemaking county before Prohibition. Because grapes from this vineyard went into wines that he took to the 1893 Chicago Columbian Exhibition and got best in class, better than anything that Napa produced. And then took it to the Paris exhibition in 1900 and got a prize there. So what's the connection of this to the library? So Charles Hammond was quite into substantial amount of community efforts here. He tried to get a railroad into Lake County, which we all know didn't work, but he was part of the water wars at the beginning. You know that Yolo County gets all the water from the lake over a certain level. So Yolo was trying to buy up a lot of land around the lake so that they could put a dam in, raise the lake, and have more water for their irrigation. And so the local people were resisting that. He was a leader in that. And then these women's protective clubs grew up as kind of an auxiliary for that, protecting the lake. And so Harriet Hammond was the head of the local protective club, and he was fighting. The other thing that he did was help found the first high school in the county, Clear Lake High School in Lakeport. And I think that was founded in 1914. And so the connection to the library has to do with what happened on graduation day of Clear Lake High School in 1915. So here's an excerpt from the Santa Rosa Press Democrat, June 16th, 1915. A very tragic ending to the commencement exercises of the Clear Lake Union High School occurred here last night when Colonel Charles Mifflin Hammond, the orator of the evening, expired in his seat from the effects of heart trouble immediately following his presentation speech of diplomas to the waiting graduates. The death of this prominent citizen has cast a gloom over the community, which today is taking effect in the benumbed paralysis of local affairs. That's something that might appear in the newspapers, right? Yeah, you would have written that. So this is June of 1915. So what what Harriet decides to do, she wants to eventually go back east, but she wants to endow this library. So she gave the money for the library. She brought back out as the architect the nephew of Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, who was the architect of it, and they built the library, and it opened on October 19th, 1916. So that's interesting, and it's still the women's protective clubs. We do an ice cream social for them every year so they can raise money for the library. And so this is the date, October 1916, and you know, we have all the old hotel registers from 1906 to 1954. So I say, oh, this is cool. I'll look up October 19th. There might be a Roosevelt or a Longfellow or somebody famous, right? Oh, this would be cool. We have one book missing, and that's 1960. So that would have been my giant coup if I could have pulled a Roosevelt or a Longfellow in Upper Lake, for heaven's sakes. Okay, just to finish off, back to the hotel. This is what the hotel looked like about 1900. You can hardly read this. It says Tallman House Hotel. This is probably Mary Moore Tallman. Upper Lake, you can see, used to flood pretty much every year until they put the levees in the 1960s. And here is what it looked like in the 1920s. You see the name had been changed to Rife's Hotel because Winnie Tallman married a guy that ran a pool hall down the street called Henry Rife, so they changed the name. That's the sign that was still up there when we bought it. So we put the original name back. Upper Lake basically burned, most of the town burned in 1924, for better or for ill. The hotel didn't burn. And so most of this town that you see dates from the late 20s, the rebuilt. And then this is what it looked like in October of 2002.
Wow.
With me sitting here. What the hell did Lynn get us? What?
That's a busy girl.
Divorce is in the yeah, I'm looking at this. You really want to do this? This is so it had been abandoned since 1962. So if we hadn't bought it, they would have at least had to change this for sale sign because it was rusting out. It was getting too rusted. The local fire chief said to the county was going to condemn it. He says, don't just tear it down, let us practice putting out fires if you're going to get rid of it. So that kind of motivated the seller, and Lynn came along at the wrong time, pardon me. But it looks like it's occupied, right? But the people got so tired of seeing see-through that they painted these curtains on the windows. Yeah. So that was it. It was just on cement blocks and field stone. So you see, they had to dig out from under it and jack it up and set it down on. And then we just have a small transformation to the current one. And just a couple of others. This is the downstairs parlor. You can see the painting on the windows.
Oh, wow, yeah.
But, you know, this was cheaply built, but they had such craftsmen then, like these doors. This is all mortar and tenon. No glue, no nails, no nothing. Put together by real craftsmen. We have two of these. It took one guy a month to pull those apart, clean them up, and put them back the whole way. You know, just craftsmen that didn't, it was a quality. And of course, high ceilings because there's no air conditioning and you have all these transoms to allow hot air to flow. And then this is the stairwell. Same stairwell. We took it apart, put it back. It's got the same square nails, the original square nails, the square head nails.
Wow.
And upstairs, a little bit different. And then this is one of the rooms. So here I'll tell a little story about our friend Kendra, the interior designer. So the one thing I remember, we're in her office in San Francisco, and we don't know what the inside of this is going to look like. And she comes out, I still remember, with a, palette of paper and textiles and a board, right? And it's got flowers, and it's got checks, and it's got stripes, and it's got this and that all over. And I said, Kendra, I don't know, but my mother always told me you don't put checks and stripes and flowers together. Kendra says, Bernie, you hired me because I know a little more than you do about interior design. Trust me. I think that's pretty much.
Oh, I can imagine.
So I think it worked out okay. You got the checks, we got the flowers, we got the stripes. I like the striped carpet. We have some of it at home. So thank you very much, Kendra. This is the kind of Main Street in 1900. The Main Street is now paved. And here is the local grocer helping them put up the arch at the front of the town. This is redevelopment. When did that? It must be 15 years ago now. Yeah. And then here is the construction crew that was here for too long. Every week we had to pay them, but they took down this black walnut tree on the street because it was where the parking lot was going to be. They brought in this portable sawmill. They cut the black walnut into 25-foot lengths and dried. Ian remembers because I have a picture of you at the sawmill. They dried the planks over the winter in army tents with dehumidifiers to get the water out, and that's the bar top in the saloon and the reception desk here. And this is Andy Peterson, who some of you may remember was the redevelopment officer here, was very helpful, and he always wanted to be the first guest. So here he is getting the first key. We actually had keys in those days. And this was the first event we had in the restaurant. It was the Lake County Model A Club Christmas party. You can see there's still ladders here. We opened this in 2005 and this a year later. So the lady across the street who lived here forever in the 30s and watched us build this, she said, wow, gosh, you fixed it up, but it looks exactly the way it used to look in the 30s with all these Model A's. And then this is the grand opening. So this is the lady, 88 years old, Harriet Tallman at Kissian, who was the youngest child of the youngest child that I mentioned. And she came with a walker, and she kicked her walker away. She says, if I'm going up there to cut this ribbon, I'm not going to be in a walker. Lynn's cutting the thing, and for some reason I'm celebrating. I'm not sure what I'm doing there. So Lillian, it's a hot day in June, and after the event, she's sitting there having a Coke, and I go up to thank her, and she said, Bernie, she said, They say everybody has their 15 minutes of fame, and I think I just had mine. And she brought a picture of herself playing as a kid in the courtyard there. When she passed, she came like once a month after that, and when she passed away, we had a nice memorial for her right here in this. So my last slide is this one. This is a watercolor done by a guy named J.P. Sarland, a businessman down the street before we opened, and it took him like 15 days, he said, just to get all the details right. And then this one is me. I did this. I did. Lynn, keep.
Okay, keep going.
In about 15 seconds in a photo app. Come on. You got to get used to AI, people. Anyway, that's my 398,000 year thing.
For all of us that love Lake County and love the lake and love here, we thank you both so much for